One of the things I love most about the internal audit industry is that we do work in the spirit of continuous improvement, both as a team, right, and the services that we offer our organization. But I think for a lot of people as individuals, they're looking to continue to step up their game, regardless if they're trying to get to the next level or not. They're trying to improve their craft.
This episode is brought to you by Green Skies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction through an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Green Skies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Green Skies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell. Today on the show, we have Tom O'Reilly. He's the founder of the Internal Audit Collective. He was formerly the Field Chief Audit Executive for Audit Board. And I could probably go on for like another 20 minutes on Tom's intro, just from everything that he's done, everything that's out there, all the work he's accomplished, all the good work that he's accomplished. And so actually, I'm just going to say for Tom, just Google Tom O'Reilly, add the word audit to the end, and you can see everything great and wonderful that Tom's done. Otherwise, we're going to be here for forever. For the Internal Audit Collective, if you run a SOX shop and you want to, you're always trying to make it better, or if you just want to expand your network with other SOX leaders, or if you're going through like a SOX modernization process, or maybe you don't have a world-class SOX shop and that's what you want, then I would highly recommend reaching out to Tom. Info's all over here. Again, if you search for him, you'll find him. He's all over LinkedIn. Also does a lot of fantastic posts on LinkedIn. Even if you're not in the SOX world, if you're in audit, give Tom a follow. There will be something in any given week that you go, oh yeah, that's a really good point. Never thought about that. Thanks, Tom. So highly recommend that. All right, so given Tom's broad knowledge and network, we hit on a few different topics here. So if Tom could change one thing about the profession, what would that be? Given his experience, I was super fascinated to hear what he had to say about that. We also talk about how to help auditors advance in their career. So if you have CAE aspirations or something like that, I would definitely check that bit out. And then again, given Tom's broad experience and knowledge, we also talk analytics, tech, and all that kind of good stuff. So with that said, here we go. All right, Tom, I know you've had a lot of changes going on, so you might have a pretty extensive either ChatGPT, Llama, Claude, whatever your LLM of choice is, or your internet browsing history as well. So what's been going on in there? What have you been looking into lately? What area of interest has kind of peaked for you?
Well, I will talk about how to build a helpful and impactful community. I'll save that for later, but and then you've also gave me instructions, Trent, where I can't talk about, travel, which is unfortunate because I just came back from a trip my wife and I took to Paris, but we won't talk about that. Two things. So first, I coach my daughter's fifth grade basketball team. She's a absolute menace, and I love coaching it. So our season starts next week, or at least the practice does, and so I'm looking up a lot of plays, basketball plays that I can start implementing with those girls. And then the second thing is I recently started playing chess online. So I use chess.com. And so my YouTube, video history is full of chess openings, right? So for white, I'm using the London system. For black, I use the King's Defense. And I could go on for sometimes hours if I wanted to watching those things. I get into it. So now, whether or not my chess score reflects all the hours of video I watch is a different story, but it's fun nonetheless.
All right, well, you mentioned your kid, which immediately made me go, about to brag on mine now then. Thanks, Tom. And for those who've ever seen any of my webinars, more times than not, I will work him in there in some way. So he's 6. Their flag football league just finished Saturday, and they maybe passed the ball in a given game 4 times. And so he has been all year, I think they played 7 or 8 games. it's just been pick six or die. Like, that's all he wants is a pick six. And the second play of the game, he picked this kid off, ran it back for a touchdown. And like, we had to go to a birthday party afterwards, right afterwards. And there's kids like we didn't know, and be like, "Hey, I'm Porter. I had a pick six today." And you're like, what is a pick six? Most of them didn't even know what he was talking about. So there's that. And the other thing is they do like a chess league at his school. And so most of it's just like this piece does this, or rook can do this. This is the moves. But as you kind of go through it, you do learn different openings and things like that. Anyway, my best friend and I, we used to in college, late night, sometimes we would play chess. Rarely did we finish a game. But anyway, he was in town one time about a year and a half ago. And in 3 moves, like my kid made a move, and then my buddy, we both looked at the board and went, I think, yep, that is checkmate. I was like, Mark, you just got crushed by a 4.5-year-old in chess in 3 moves. I mean, it was a 1 in a billion. He didn't know what he was doing. He just happened to move that, that piece there. But anyway, we don't let him live that down. So if you need some chess competition, let me know. We'll get them signed up.
I'm afraid to ask. That's funny.
All right. I am particularly interested. We've been asking this lately, and I probably know where you're going to go with this, but because of your former role, especially in audit board and all the communications that you have, emojis and emails, yes or no?
So, I'll use them from time to time. So I don't think it's a big deal or not. If you're asking me the question on what I would recommend to others, I would just say you do you, right? So if you feel like you want to communicate well and you like using emojis, go for it. Absolutely, it's who you are. If you don't like it, if you think you need to be more professional, absolutely do it. That's what you do. So that's how I think about it. I'll throw some in from time to time.
I think that's probably my favorite answer so far. All right, one-off question. Unprepared, and it might take you a second to think of it. But I was on Spotify yesterday, and this song popped up from a movie. I'll mention it later. And I was listening to it, and I was like, oh, we need to understand like what underrated movies are out there that people might not know about. If you had an underrated maybe movie that you could recommend, which is a tough question to get asked on the spot, what would that be?
I don't watch too many movies now. I used to. I'm probably more in the genre of the whatever the popular guy movies were in the earlier mid aughts, or up there with my favorites. It's classical. Um, I will say, something underrated as a parent. There's a lot of very good kids movies out. Like the Inside Out movies were really good. So I'll say that Inside Out too. I recently saw that with my daughter, and I liked it.
I think considering that we did not prepare you for that question, I think that's a great answer. The song that popped up on my playlist was Ya Ya Bing Bong. It's from Eurovision Song Contest. I think it's on Netflix. Well, it's super underrated. I've seen it 4 times now. I usually don't watch a movie more than twice, but that's one. It's like, what do we watch? Just put that on. It's always good. All right, cool. Let's get into the actual stuff now. If you could change one thing about the audit profession, what would that be? And you've been around for a while, and you've seen a lot of internal audit departments and how they do things, their processes, et cetera. So I'm especially interested. What would you change?
Well, first off, before I go through that, I do want to thank you for having me on. And quite frankly, sitting on the sidelines watching you for the past 4 years has been nothing short of amazing. So what you do for our industry and community, hat tip to you, dude. And quite frankly, we've talked about this before. You've inspired me to kind of take my leap. So I appreciate you doing everything that you do. Um, Man, internal audit. We Before I talk about what perhaps we could change, if anything, what I would say, it's an awesome time right now to be an internal audit. Like, there's so many things that we're doing well as an industry, just generally and collectively. I think generally speaking, from a lot of the audit leaders that I talk to, there appears to be a trend where more audit projects are kind of non-routine or first-time audits, which is, I think, kind of a good thing. Is probably highlighting the fact that we're going to be more risk focused. Um, because of leaders like you and audit board and others, our industry is really leaning into technology, right? That kind of that first step of that maturity model is maybe just getting an audit management solution or a purpose-built control solution. But leaning in and really more and more internal audit teams are have a higher sophistication level of using data analytics. And I think that, a lot of internal audit teams that I've talked to are proactively trying to figure out how they can best use Gen AI. When you think back to when internal audit started talking about data analytics as an industry, it was in the 2000s, and I think for like 15 to almost 20 years, for 15 years, it like took us. We just always stayed at this low maturity outside of like pockets of teams. So, but I don't think that's the case anymore. And what I also really like that I find more and more audit leaders that I'm talking to, they're really really concerned about how they're how they're perceived, not necessarily by their entire company, but by their specific customers, right? So when they're carrying out audit projects, they're being thoughtful and making changes about their process with intent to make it easier for that audit customer to liaise with them, or even better to help that risk owner or control owner take more accountability and ownership of their own responsibilities. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we continue as an industry to hire very qualified people who are not um, okay for the most part with the status quo. And I think one of the things I love most about the internal audit industry is that we do work in the spirit of continuous improvement, both as a team, right, and the services that we offer our organization. But I think for a lot of people as individuals, that they're looking to continue to step up their game, regardless if they're trying to get to the next level or not. They're trying to improve their craft.
I think I love the continuous improvement piece. I mean, I remember in external audit, the only thing you could not say as an answer to a question is that's how we did it last year. Of course, I did that, 2 years into it, and I just got reamed for it. And I was like, that's the one thing we're not supposed to, it's like when somebody says, don't think about the color blue. You're like, blue, 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 blue. Don't say that. And I said it. And immediately I was just like, I know it's not right. I'm sorry. I don't know why we do it like that. I'll go figure it out. So I do love that though. Continuous improvement is sort of a passion of mine. Just like, let's always make something a little bit better. And then definitely on the DA front, we're starting to see smaller teams that historically wouldn't have a full-time data analyst who now have full-time data analysts, or we lost a senior on the ops audit side, for example. Instead of replacing them with another senior, we're going to go get maybe a junior data analyst or something like that. So I'm definitely seeing that also, and obviously a big fan of that. Well,
I mean, you had what? Sorry to interrupt, but I'd say you had like what, 200, 300 people as part of your data analytics conference in September.
mhm,
It's amazing. I mean,
yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah.
For one specific topic for 2 days to talk about just specific uses of analytics and AI in internal audit, and you had over 300 paid customers. I think that just shows that as an industry, we're moving in the right direction.
And maybe this is a good way to now mention this. So, because of you, Tom, who texted me, I think the day after the conference ended, and you said, "Hey, tech changes so much. You should probably do something in the spring also." And immediately I went, "Yep, we're going to do it in the spring." And so we have the schedule for the spring. We haven't started promoting it yet, but it'll be sometime in March for like a mini conference because it does, to exactly to your point, it changes so fast that even so, we wrote this blog that's gonna be published, I think, in December. And I told them, I said, before we wrote it a week and a half ago, maybe. I said, before you publish it, send it to me at least 2 weeks before because it's probably gonna be dated by the time it gets published because things are changing so fast. So all that said, thank you for the recommendation. And for those that attend the spring mini conference, you have Tom to thank. So thank you for the idea there.
We were talking about this beforehand, and you'd asked kind of if there's one thing that I would change. So let me address that because there's a lot of things going on right now. But if I had the magic wand, right, and I could wave the magic wand and change perhaps one thing about, and again, broad strokes, generally about our industry, is I think that we have an opportunity to continue to improve. And the specific area where I see it is that I think more and more internal audit teams have the opportunity to bring more external perspectives into their projects, right? And so as I think about kind of the current state of internal audit, there's still a lot of teams, and this is fine, right? Where they'll carry out audit projects and they'll test controls, and generally they're testing for um, the operating effectiveness of those controls. Are these controls working as management would expect? And they'll probably also test for some of the design, to see if the control is designed as expected. Um, but the design perspective is usually based off of the experience of the internal audit team, right? Or if they're, working with testing a process within an application that they're aware of, they built to provide, those opinions or recommendations based off of their prior experience. But as I see, as I talked about earlier, as we see the internal audit industry continuing to push forward in regards to focusing more of our audits and an audit plan on perhaps higher risks that are associated with our company's success or that could impact our company's success, as well as kind of new and emerging risks. What will happen, with my opinion, what I've seen is that it's going to result in more first-time audit projects where we don't have that as an internal audit team. We likely don't have that type of experience to really just say, hey, here's what we should be doing, right? And a lot of times, if our company doesn't have a process in place, we really have to kind of figure out, okay, well, what are we providing assurance over, right? Whether it's an advisory type project or an assurance type project. And so we have to take a different approach than what we've currently done, which is, either use the work, use inspiration from the audit programs that you've done in the past, kind of like what you were alluding to earlier with your joke and comment for the external auditors, or just doing research online. What's available, from a Google search. Maybe now it's available from a general chat GPT search, or, using your network to find someone else who's done an audit of a similar nature, um, and base your audit program off of that. So, with that being said, well, okay, cool. There's a perhaps an opportunity to improve. Well, how do you do it? I think about it in a few ways, and I reflect back on my time when I was in a Big Four firm. When I was there for about 3 years, I had the opportunity to work with two internal audit departments of Fortune 100 companies that spent an absolute boatload of money with the firm on internal audit. But what was cool is they actually went about it in completely different ways. One was, they were both respected by their company. One was kind of a chop shop. You do an audit project for 3 weeks of field work with a few weeks of planning, a few weeks of reporting, and you're in and you're out. It was over kind of some of the key operational financial reporting processes, but um, kind of high intensity projects. Obviously, we're billable, so our time mattered, and we were kind of expected to kind of cover a lot of work. The other audit team that I worked for had a completely different approach. They were way more cerebral. And I say that not in a disparaging way to the first audit team, but the fact that they saw themselves more as consultants. They did a lot more first time and non-routine audits. And my role on that engagement was to specifically work within the Big Four company to identify the subject matter experts who are on the consulting side of the business, to convince that senior manager or that partner or the managing director of that consulting practice to say, hey, our client is doing a pricing audit, right? Or a real estate audit, something that's never been done before. And what we're looking for help is from a consultant to spend 40 to 60 hours with this audit team over the course of, 12 weeks, to kind of help and provide that subject matter expertise. And when we did that, these audits and the value that was perceived by the audit customer was significantly different and better than just the normal routine audits that we had. And so let me just provide what that would look like. So first, when we would identify the subject matter expert, that person would kind of be we'd have a couple of planning meetings with us. They'd help us, identify big trends, big themes within the industry of the process that we're auditing. And then they would give us some information to do some research, and we would create our general pre-planning questionnaire to go meet with, the audit customer, that key executive of that area. We would invite the subject matter expert with us, and inevitably we would have these conversations where, as much as I asked open-ended questions, you as the audit customer would still give the auditor somewhat closed-ended responses. And we would do that for 30, 45 minutes, what have you. But then at the very end, the subject matter expert heard enough to ask like one or two just kind of open-ended questions, and then the floodgates would open. And we would get all this information. We're like, oh, geez, we had no idea, right? So just that in itself, getting that type of information really helped us kind of scope a more targeted, more relevant, and prepare a more relevant audit project. From field work, we didn't have the SME do the field work. That's what we're the experts in. But when observations were identified, we'd give a call to her or him and ask like, hey, is this something that we should dive deep in, or is this relevant, or is this not relevant to the project? And that was helpful. And then finally, during our, the end of field work, our closing meetings, we would have the SME with us, whether it be in person or on the phone. And as we're, sharing and communicating observations or recommendations, it wasn't the internal audit team just waxing poetic saying, here's what we think that you should do because we're internal audit and you're our customer and here are the recommendations, you tell us otherwise. It was actually a bit more of a symbiotic meeting where we would highlight the observations that were found. The consultant would highlight why this is an issue based off of what they've seen in the industry. And then they would provide some recommendations based off of their credibility, right? Their experience. And then all of a sudden, the audit customer, like the person was like, yes, like, yes, this makes sense. Or they're like, yes, this is what I've been trying to do, but now I haven't had the support to tell my leader that this is what we should do. And just having that type of conversation really would make the audit customers leave and say like, they would just like question what happened. Like, holy Moses, like this was awesome. Like this is exactly what we needed. And on top of that, it was basically free, right? Because there's no like fee to have an internal audit team come and do this. And so for that customer, and then when I actually turned out to be a chief audit executive myself, I employed the same practice. And so we would have, anywhere between 40 to 60% of our audit plan use these subject matter experts. And, for our audit team, that helped us become the sought out kind of advisors that we were. Were we providing the advice? Not really. We were the conduit to getting experts in, to kind of help provide that feedback.
I think that I'm glad you explained the how. I tell people a lot of times my favorite follow-up question on the show is, that's great. How did you do that? Or how could we do that? How should we do that? And you absolutely crushed that. I'm really glad you did, mostly because I feel like initially when you said like bring outside folks in to take a look at this, whatever process or the audit is, I know for me, I immediately went cyber. Like that's where I think most people's brains go, is we don't have cyber expertise on the team, and that's a big deal right now. And so, okay, cyber, that's the use case. But I think just on the business front, and this is something we've said multiple times on the show, and we've had experts, thought leaders alike say the same thing when we say, is it more important to know the business or know audit? And they say, no, knowing the business is more important than knowing the audit piece. And so I think what you said speaks to that especially well also. So I really appreciate the how-to. That's something we talked about kind of off air, was the importance of the how-to instead of just the why you should do something. This is how you should do it. And so I think that example really walked through from
Well, let me
planning to reporting, basically.
so let me add to that too, because the next question that you'll inevitably get from your interested and massive audience is, well, I can't afford to have consultants come in and do this. And so here's how we handle it. We didn't have a big budget when I was at, Analog, but what we found is that, these experts, they would probably charge standard rates because they were only, getting 40 hours, right? They didn't want their senior manager to be involved. They wanted like their managers and seniors to be involved in that consulting practice. That's where they're kind of getting their money. But so we were open to paying the standard rates. And, when you think about the average cost of an audit, which for most companies is between $35,000 and $50,000, we would probably pay anywhere between $5,000 and $15,000 per audit for that subject matter expert. Even though those firms didn't really want to do that, they wanted those bigger projects, 400, 4,000 hour projects. What we were able to do is we had a conversation with our CFO saying, hey, if you can ask this in particular Big Four firm, since the Big Four really have these really big consulting practices, they're probably the most viable option for this. We said, if you can promise like their business development executive to bring that we can bring them to the table for like bigger projects around maybe like HR transformations or IT transformations, we're not going to tell them that we're going to give it to them, but we're just going to say we'll bring them to the table
Yeah.
if you do this for us. And when we did that, all parties were kind of happy. So that worked. And then there's one other thing too. If I have another minute, the other way that we got around it, like, and sometimes if teams still can't get the budget to use these SMEs, there's even lower cost ways to get this external perspective. An audit that we did in our HR, we were doing like a strategic sourcing or hiring project one time, and we couldn't find the appropriate SME within the group that we're trying to work with. So we just went to our Human Resources Association, and we called somebody and we said, here's what we're trying to do. Do you have any resources available to us to kind of do this? They're like, hey, look, if you pay, it was like $500 for this industry association, not only will you get all these resources that will highlight the how-to, we'll actually even let you talk to a couple of our specialists. And when we had those conversations, they're like, this is awesome. Like, I can't believe we're talking to someone in internal audit about this. And they gave us all this great feedback and perspective. So I guess the point the point I want to make is that even if you can't hire consultants, there's opportunities to be creative and strategic to get that external expertise to really up level the assurance that you're providing.
Yeah, and something I like to do is, because the first 5 pages of Google basically are owned by the organizations that have the budgets to have all their stuff on the first page. Like, it's not like you just write a blog and you cross your fingers that you make it to the first page of Google. That's not how it works. It takes a lot of resources to get there, but so a lot of times what we'll do is basically do that, like do our, your search, whatever it is that you need, and then immediately just jump to page like 6 and just start scrolling down. And that's where you can find the, maybe depending on needs, the more affordable option is buried in there somewhere, where there's someone who has been, there's a solopreneur, or they have like a boutique practice, but they can't afford the marketing budget to be on the first page. But that doesn't mean that they don't have the expertise in that area. So that's one. And then obviously LinkedIn is a fantastic source. I think,
How about another one? Recently retired executives of big name companies that
yeah, those are great.
whether you pay like just like hey, here's a couple of bucks, we just want to pick your brain, right? I guarantee if your team searched LinkedIn for these types of individuals, half of them would do it for free.
Yeah.
They'd be like, hell yeah, like I want to be sought out for my expertise and advice,
That's
and
a
random
really
people.
great idea. I mean, we do that at Green Skies. We do that, especially if I see where a CIE or something's retired. Immediately, like, hey, let's talk about whatever it is, because they have the time, and by and large, people like helping people and sharing what they know. And so, I ask 2, 3 questions, and get absolutely your money's worth from that. So I love that idea too. We almost do that intuitively.
And that's actually just to put a bow on this point, is kind of the cool thing about internal audit in general, is that especially with the standards coming out, there's a lot of prescription on how to do these certain things. But uh, when you think about our industry and profession compared to others within an organization, there's so much opportunity to be creative, and to kind of be strategic, and to even do things in a unique way that could still get to the ultimate endpoint of helping provide information and advice to kind of help the executive management team with their decision-making process and the board with their oversight responsibilities.
I think we could cut this episode right now, and it would be like a ton of value added. Yeah, we do get, so sometimes we get folks that'll reach out and go, hey, I know you do a lot of like how to be a CAE and how to advance your career, but like, can you just help me in what I'm doing right now as a staff? And we have tried to do that, but I think by and large, there is more people that are looking to advance their careers, become CAEs, et cetera. So like, Tom, what are you doing to help those folks, or what advice maybe even would you give to those folks?
Yeah, actually, I would maybe the advice first, and the advice is inspired by one of your former podcast guests, Kendall Berg. For those who are avid watchers of the show, they'll know that she goes under the moniker of that career coach. And I actually reached out to her and found her online on like Instagram, because she just has unbelievable, just awesome content to help professionals who are a little bit ambitious, who want to advance their career. She provides very real world practical advice on what the corporate environment is like and how to navigate the corporate environment to do so. And through I asked her to participate in some training programs that I put together with Audit Board. She's involved, just like you are, with some training programs that we had at the Internal Audit Collective. But the one thing that's always stuck, uh, when I listened to her talk and I learned from her, is this concept of promotable activities. And I mean, I've been in the business in business for 20 plus years, and I didn't really think about this, but as people are looking to advance their career, I think a lot of internal auditors are, the way they do it is like they'll be very good at their current job, and then as openings arise, they'll be okay. Who's the most tenured person? If they're meeting minimum expectations, let's move them forward. And so for a lot of us, that maybe that's okay, but a lot of us, if you're working for a small audit team, that may not necessarily fit your time horizon and what you want to achieve. And so the way to kind of perhaps do this a little bit quicker is to focus on promotable activities versus non-promotable activities. So if I can really quickly, what are non-promotable activities in internal audit? Simply put, they're all the job requirements that you were hired to do, right? So if you're a senior auditor, if you're testing controls and completing audits, those are non-promotable activities because that's what's expected of you. And quite frankly, for those who want to get promoted, sometimes, as counterintuitive as this sounds, if you get to be really, really good at your day job, right, those non-promotable activities, you could actually be making a business case to your leader to say, hey, we can't promote Trent. We can't afford to lose him because he's so darn good at doing these audit projects, right? So if you're in that situation, if you're Trent, the senior auditor, then how do you focus on activities to get promoted, to be seen to be promotable? There's a couple ways. First is to identify projects that will have a broader impact on the success of your team, right? So, for example, a promotable activity could be for one internal audit department that maybe they haven't gone down the train of thinking about conforming to the IAA standards. Well, maybe that manager or that senior can say, "Hey, let me download the 120 pages and let me do a reconciliation between what was prescribed or recommended or required versus what we're doing, and create a to-do list of those themes," right? And then start working off that. Another thing could be, just trying to if they found a best practice that works for them, how can they enable all their other teammates to be able to kind of take on and carry out that type of time-saving activity? So what are those activities or special projects that they can focus on that will not necessarily have an impact on how they're doing their job? Maybe they can do it a bit faster, but how can they make the team better to kind of make the company better? A couple other opportunities or promotable activities would be just to network. So many internal auditors are just kind of behind their desks, so to speak, or behind a Slack or a Microsoft Teams channel or Zoom calls where they're doing their work, but they're not really having one-on-one conversations. And you don't have to go out there and have like a deep conversation about industry trends. Like, just go talk to people, find out what's working on them, you know, just have a normal human conversation and just get people know that people will like you and trust you, and your reputation will start preceding itself as well. And then people will say, geez, why is Trent the senior auditor? Every time I talk to him, like, he's always got these cool things that he's working on. He's interesting as a person, right? I could see him being a leader of this company, right? So and a quick way to do that is to get involved with some of your internal employee resource groups. There's, every company has a bunch of them. Those groups are usually dying to have volunteers and people to help out. So, roll up your sleeves. Don't expect to be the president on day one, but if you just actually put in effort to do the work, you'll be surprised how fast that you do become a leader of those groups.
Yeah, and if they don't have a group that you're interested in, start it.
Create it.
Yeah.
Go start it.
Yeah.
Go start it. Right. And so when you think about all these, it's that these, maybe a theme when you think about these promotable activities is they require initiative, right? You need to be proactive, and you really don't want your chief audit executive to be asking to do this, and if she or he is saying, hey, here's what we want to do, then you be proactive and say, okay, well, here's ways that I can help, or even better, here's ways that I've already started helping. What do you think? Right? Don't
Yep.
ask for permission. Quite frankly, just ask for forgiveness if you
Mhm.
did the wrong thing.
There was, I think another point, if r most people, it feels like on LinkedIn, on the audit side, I'll see like their job history and then like some things that they did in there. Rarely do I go, "Oh, that's different." It's always like, "Oh, I supported this many audits," or "I ran a team of this size," or "I, tested the operating effectiveness of these controls," or
Mhm.
whatever. It's just like, all right. But to see something, a promotal activity, like you said, would make me go, "Oh, that is different. That's unique." You usually just don't see that.
Yeah. I mean, look, I did it as well as I was climbing through my career. I didn't know better. But now that like people are talking about it, like Kendall's and something that I talk about quite a bit, I think I'm, more people aware and cognizant of some best practices as opposed to just kind of doing what they think is best.
Yeah, I know for sure my resume read exactly like the LinkedIn profiles I was just talking about. It was projects I managed, number of people, resources, types of tech that I audited, things like that. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty much what they all look like. So, all right, Tom, I'm gonna give the floor to you. The stage is yours. What do you want to leave the audience with today?
Well, at the risk of being a little bit promotional, I will kind of actually do that. So last week was many people in our internal audit community know me for working at Audit Board. It's such an unbelievable company, and I've had such a world altering experience at Audit Board. So much so that I set out to kind of put my stake in the ground to help and to continue to help internal auditors. And so I'm doing that through an organization I've started called the Internal Audit Collective, which is a training company and online community for internal auditors and SOX practitioners and leaders to kind of help up level the practice of internal auditing and SOX compliance. The way I'm planning on doing this is there's 4 ways that I can help. 2 come at no charge. The first is, taking inspiration from yourself. I am publishing a weekly blog that'll be only on my website or through our newsletter called Enabling Positive Change, where I'll provide tips and perspectives on how to improve one aspect of SOX or internal audit or help individuals advance their career. And those will come out on Saturday mornings. The second way is also similar to yourself. I am hosting a profiles and leadership interview series with chief audit executives, where I'm not necessarily focusing on kind of technical aspects of internal auditor SOX compliance, but I'm really more focused on what is it that made that internal auditor achieve their ultimate goal and destination of being a chief audit executive or being a director of internal controls. And in addition to kind of understanding what made them successful, what is it that they look for from people that they're looking to hire and onboard and people to promote throughout their career. So as I think about people who read this, I don't necessarily want to help not only inform them of best practices for auditor SOX, I want to help motivate and inspire, because our industry is going to be better when we have more people pushing the boundaries of what's possible. So in addition to those 2 options, I also have 2 options where there'd be an investment by the individual to continue to expand their horizon and to pull in external perspectives. Our first training program is called the SOX Accelerator Training Program. It's a 16-week program that will consist of expert-led presentations on very specific SOX topics. It'll be solely how to, and this will be given by people who've been on your podcast, including Audit Grace Power, and you as well. You'll be doing our analytics piece. And then on the even weeks, I will facilitate a roundtable discussion with those cohort members or a subset, just talking about the key takeaways from the prior week. In addition to attending all 16 sessions, everyone who signs up for the cohort will also have a 1 year's access to the Internal Audit Collective community, which is an online Slack channel where my goal and focus is to kind of help bring an internal audit community to them at their fingertips. And what I'm hoping that'll happen is that this will give an opportunity for internal auditors to ask questions to a significant and diverse group of internal auditors and leaders to be able to get real-time responses. And when they're not asking questions, they can provide their own perspectives. And when they're not providing their own perspectives, at a minimum, they can keep a pulse on the conversation that's actually going on the front lines within our organization. So, and as we kind of build this out over the course of time, we'll continue to add new features and functionality to kind of help those individuals create a strong community and to kind of just excel at what they're doing.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.